Hello and welcome to this video. My name's Beckham. I was recently asked how to place a drop shadow around an image in Photoshop so that the shadow showed on all four sides of the image. It creates a sort of block mounted effect that can be very appealing. I started thinking about this question in relation to the presentation of images in PTE AV Studio. I think it'll make an informative video because it's a technique that does allow us to touch on some important features of this software. This video is not meant to be unique to PTE AV Studio. The techniques we're going to use are very much the same, no matter what version you're using, PicturesToExe 8 or 9 perhaps. Here I've got just 3 high resolution images. Let's use this one to start. I'll just double click to bring that down into the slide list. Whenever we begin a new project, what we see behind our images is black. Let me explain this by viewing this image in the Objects and Animation screen. Now if we go down and open it up, what I'm going to do just for a second is just move the pan controls to the left. As I move the picture aside, we can see the slideshow we're making and the background color that is the default. Now we can change this color in a couple of ways because we're not going to see any shadow while the image is sitting on a black background. So perhaps this is a good place to start by changing the background color. Now just for one moment I'm going to reset my image back in place. I can do that just by double clicking on the X alongside the pan X and it's reset. I'm going to close this window and go back to the slide list. Now there's 2 ways to change the background color. If we want to change the background for the entire project, then we use the project options. In that case, if we had 50 slides here, the background of all 50 would be changed. We would do that by going to the project options, going to the main tab, and there's the solid color we need to change. So on this occasion I can click the black and I can select white from up the top there or one of these. It doesn't matter what we use, click OK and OK. Now if I just wanted to change the color of the background of one image, which may be one of 50, then I would select the image and go to slide options. We'll see exactly the same options here in the main tab, and here we can choose solid color and change the black to white. Now because I've done that globally via the project options, if I cancel this and we go back into the Objects and Animation screen and I use my pan control this time, there we can see our white background. Now I'm going to double click the pan X to set my image back over the top of its background. But of course we're not likely to see any drop shadow if the image fills the screen. So we need to make a change there too. Now what I'm going to suggest is one way of doing that, and it's one of my favorites because you get used to these percentages. If we look at the zoom control, for example, if I put 85 in there, that presents the image pretty well on the background we have. Of course we can do this in a number of ways. We could just click and drag on the X to make it any size we want, but I just find it convenient sometimes to just overtype values. Just an idea. Now something that I find quite useful at times is our ability to adjust the names as we see them in the box down at the bottom right. As you can see, my image is represented by _D4_ and a number. Now sometimes it's quite useful to go to the properties and here we can change it. So for this particular demonstration I'm just going to call this image, and as you can see it's reflected here. Now to create the shadow, we can select a rectangle and make it black. Now there's a couple of ways we can do that. We could go up to the extreme top left of the screen where I'm indicating, but it's a long way away from where we're working down at the bottom right. But if I right click alongside my image here, I can choose Add and I can select the rectangle from here. But when I select it, there's a little bit of a problem. First of all, the rectangle is sitting over the top of my image, and that's not going to be very good for a shadow, which we want below the image. But on top of that, I've made a deliberate error here, and I've made my rectangle a child of the parent, which in this case is the image. See how they're offset? It means they're linked, a parent and child. So to create the rectangle, perhaps a better way of doing that, let me just delete that, is to make sure we don't have a selection on this image. So we can click into this box here if we want, just to remove the selection. When I do the right click again and add a rectangle, the same thing happens, but now they're not parent and child. I can now move this below the image. Two ways to do that. We can right click, if I can find my little rocker switch, and choose order, so we can go back one. But there is a nice useful shortcut. If we hold the control key, we can use page up and page down to change the order of any image, rectangle or anything that's in that little box on the bottom right corner. Now of course the next thing I need to do is to change my rectangle to black. We can do that with the options directly above. In the fill mode I can change that to solid. I can click the blue color and change that to black. But of course then we need to make the area that's going to become our shadow, and to be honest we may as well change the name of that here too, just to do the same as we did with the image. But what I was about to say is we need to go to our animation, because we need to make the zoom match the image, and we know that that's 85%. So far, so good. Now to make the drop shadow do its job, we need to blur it so that it spills out from behind the image and gives us the effect we're looking for. So if we go to our blur control, this is going to be a personal choice. Let me just click and drag to the right, and I'll increase it just so we can see it clearly. And I'll just click into the box down here to remove that yellow-green bounding box so we can see the shadow a bit more clearly. And that's looking pretty good. But we do have some other options here. Reselect your shadow, go up to the zoom, and what we can also do with zooms is, in general terms, the height and the width is linked together. So earlier on I changed the zoom X to 85 and the zoom Y followed along. But we do have a chain link here, and if I untick that, now I can change each of these independently. Why would I want to do that? Well, if I want to give my shadow maybe just a little more impact, the way I do it is this. I place my cursor into the zoom X. What I can do now, once I've got my cursor in the box, it doesn't matter where the cursor is within that box, I can nudge my up and down arrows on my keyboard and I can make my shadow smaller, as you can see, or I could nudge it a couple of steps outwards to give the drop shadow a bit more impact. But of course we'd need to do the zoom Y as well. So if we put the cursor into the zoom Y, we can do that to the same degree. We can nudge it up a couple of times. Maybe because we're working in percentages here, to balance it we may need to nudge it once more than that. But viewing is the best way to assess our work. So let me remove the bounding box once again. Now I've created quite a strong drop shadow there, or a block mounted effect, so you can see it clearly. Now if I go back and select my image, and I go back to the top of the screen and select the properties, what we could do is add to the effect. by putting a very thin line around the outer edge of the image. Now we could in fact choose white or black or any colour in between, but I think white or black is probably more appropriate. But because I've now got a white background, in normal circumstances we'd hardly see a white edge, but here of course the drop shadow would make a white background stand out. So let me tick the border option here, and I'll drop this down to something a lot less than we've got there. Let's choose about 4 pixels, and I'll click back into the box down at the bottom right so you can get a feel for what we have. Maybe that's a little bit on the small size, but of course we're not looking at the image at full size on screen, are we? If we look up at the center top of the screen, we're only viewing this image at 50%. So to assess things like thin lines and shadows, what we should be viewing then is a full screen preview, isn't it? So allow me to show you that full screen, and we can evaluate the shadow impact and also the line thickness. With the spinning round of the screen, what I've done with this one is just to change the colour of the white line to black. And finally, I've gone back to the white line, but I've just reduced the shadow a little bit. Now the effect of the drop shadow looked quite nice, but suppose we then decide that we'd like to add some animation to our image. Well, now we've got a little bit of a problem, because any animation we made to the image needs to be given to the shadow too, or the image is going to part company with the shadow. And if I wanted to zoom the image at the same time, that would also complicate things. And while I'm talking about the zoom, I'm just going to go up to my zoom and relock the zoom X and Y together. So if I click and drag the X, for example, there you can see the problem we would have if we were zooming and panning. So I'm going to reset my zoom back to 85, and I'm going to double click my pan X to reset my image, because one way we can deal with this is by using a frame, and now we're going to use a parent and child relationship to our benefit. Now we can select a frame from either the top left of the screen, but once again it's a long way away from where we're working down at the bottom right. So what I'm going to suggest is we click into the box at the bottom right to remove any selections on the image or the shadow. Then I can right click and choose to add a frame. Now the frame is invisible to us, and we're just going to use it to control the image and the shadow together, both their pan and the zoom, in fact any animation we wanted to apply. In the properties section we can even change the name of this frame too. It's probably not necessary to do that as we did with the image and shadow here, because we're only using one frame, but if we were using many, then it could be quite useful. So what we need to do here is to take our image, and I'm holding the control key to select the shadow as well. We need to take both of those and make them into children of the parent, which is the frame. To do that, I'm going to right click those two I've selected and choose cut. Don't worry, we haven't lost them. With the frame selected, I'm going to right click and paste. Now you can see exactly what we saw a few moments ago, but now we can see once again the parent and child relationship. Now I'm going to remove the selection on the image and the shadow by just clicking into the box. Now because the frame can control both the pan and the zoom we applied to the image and the shadow, 85% if you look up to the top right, well, we didn't need to do that. So what I'm going to do is to reset both my shadow with a double click, my image with a double click, because when we use the frame to control things, we can do both using the frame. And the beauty of the frame, of course, is if we then decide to pan the image or animate the image in another way, then both the image and the shadow work as children of the parent, which in this case is our frame. Now, with the spinning round of the screen, I've added just a little bit of animation to the frame here. Let me explain what I've done, but I'm not going to go into detail. I think we can look at animation in one or two of the other videos I've created, and possibly new ones I'll make in the future. But you can see there's 4 keyframes there. I've given this image 13 seconds on screen. 4 seconds for it to appear from the left hand side. So if I click the left hand keyframe, so it's going to take 4 seconds to come in here and drop gently to a stop. Between this keyframe and this keyframe is a time of 5 seconds. That's when we can view the image. And in the last 4 seconds, it will leave the screen at the bottom right. Although you're not going to see this very sweetly because I'm trying to record a screen capture video while trying to play a smooth animation, probably not going to work brilliantly, but nevertheless, I'll put my cursor at the start, press play, and you'll get a feel for what we've created. And we've got our white line and we've got our shadow. We can go back into our shadow at any time and adjust it along with the edge also. One last thing just to bring this video to a close. In fact, 2 last things, because I've just thought of something else that I should have said. When we start any project, we don't always start off with a firm idea of exactly what we want to do, so using a frame for our animation can give us a lot of creative freedom. But if I was aware I wanted to use this parent and child relationship right from the start, then I could have started the process by first selecting the frame, right-clicking the frame and choosing Add, and I could have added the image and also the rectangle directly inside the frame. Here we've done it in a slightly roundabout way, but it amounts to exactly the same thing. So here we do have our block mount shadow effect, but seeing as we've made an effort to create it, why don't we make it into a slide style, so what we've created here can be saved and used for future use. The creation of a slide style from what we've done here is pretty easy. But what I would do first, I think, is just go across to the little box on the bottom right corner of the screen and select the image. Remember, the image is the only variable within the slide style we're about to make, because we want to apply the frame, the animation and the shadow to any image. So this image needs to be our main image. Just to be reassured of that, I'm just going to go up to the Properties tab above, and there I can see it ticked, Main Object 1. So from here I can close the window and go back to the main screen. With my image selected from the slide list, I'm going to go to Styles and Themes, making sure I've got the Styles button checked here. I'm going to go to the Tools on the left and create a style. All we need to do here is to select a category. I'm going to just place mine in User Styles, and I'll just call this Shadow Block Mount. In the windows beneath, I can put my name and any comments I feel are necessary. On this occasion, I'll leave them blank and click Create, and we're done. And to make sure all is working as we would expect, I'll double click this image and this image, select both, go back to Styles and Themes to apply it. There's my user style, there's my shadow block mount. I'll select that and apply. There we have our slide style applied to in this case 2 other images, but it could be 22 or 222. If you're watching this video on YouTube, please consider giving me a thumbs up, as long as you think the video is worth it, of course. And don't forget to consider subscribing below. And also hit the notification bell so you'll be informed whenever I post a new video. This video and others are also available as a download from my website, and you'll find a link to our site below, but as you can see, it's on screen now. The software that we've been using here, PTE AV Studio 10, is available at the address you can see on screen. Thanks for watching.